It was one of those quiet evenings in our Chicago condo, the kind where even the city traffic seemed to hush itself. I remember the distant hum of Lakeshore Drive, the muted glow of the skyline pressing in through our kitchen window. I'd been sitting at our marble kitchen island, Jack's tablet in front of me, scrolling for a new chicken recipe I'd promised to make. Sometimes, I think it was the ordinary things that made the worst moments so shocking. I wasn't snooping, not even curious, just looking for something to spice up our dinner routine. Jack always loved my cooking, and tonight I wanted to make something he'd remember. He'd left his tablet out, unlocked, probably after checking his emails. I didn't give it a second thought. My hands were flour-dusted from prepping dough. I scrolled past endless Pinterest links and food blogs, wondering if I should just stick to something classic. That's when it happened. A notification slid across the top of the screen, a name I didn't recognize. At first, I figured it was some delivery update, or maybe someone from his work. Jack's a consultant, always bouncing between projects and clients, always too busy, always just checking one more email. So I tapped the notification with the kind of distracted innocence you can only have when you truly don't expect to find trouble. But the words that appeared made my world tilt sideways. "She doesn't make me feel the way you do." I stared at the words, not quite comprehending, like my brain refused to connect them to my life. My hand hovered over the screen, frozen mid-swipe. I felt the blood drain from my face, my heart thudding in my chest so loudly it seemed to echo off the walls. For a moment, the room felt smaller, like even the air had turned on me, watching to see what I'd do next. I'm not sure what made me scroll up. Instinct, maybe. Or the sharp sting of fear that suddenly I didn't know the man I'd married. I slid my finger up the glass, breath catching, reading more and more. There they were, dozens of flirty, late-night messages, private jokes, memories I'd never been part of. Each line burned into me, and the more I read, the clearer it became. It wasn't some random woman, not a stranger or a flirtatious coworker. The name at the top was Amanda. His ex. Amanda, the woman I'd always known about, the one he described as just a piece of his past. I used to laugh about her with Jack, teasing him about their wild college days. I'd never once felt threatened. But now, reading those messages, the trust I'd had felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to believe it was some misunderstanding, but the intimacy in the words was undeniable. They reminisced about nights I'd never been part of, made jokes about things I couldn't possibly understand, little references that made me realize how much of him I never knew. My face stayed calm. I could see my reflection in the dark part of the screen, the city lights behind me, my eyes wide but my lips pressed into a determined line. There was a kind of strange clarity settling over me, like this was a moment I'd always known would come, even if I'd never truly believed it would. My first instinct was to slam the tablet shut, storm into the living room where Jack was watching a game, and demand an explanation. That's what you see in movies, right? The big confrontation, the tears, the shouting. But something in me, something colder and sharper, whispered to wait. Jack was always quick on his feet, charming when he needed to be, and if I confronted him now, he'd just twist it all around. He'd lie, or gaslight, or worse, make me feel like I was the crazy one for caring so much. So I just kept reading. I scrolled all the way up, through weeks and weeks of messages, some playful, some intimate, some that hurt so much I felt my hands tremble. I noticed how he never mentioned me by name, but I could see the way he made little digs at me for Amanda's entertainment, turning our marriage into a punchline for his ex. I think that stung even more than the flirting. He'd made a joke out of me, for her. By the time I got to the start of their conversation, I was done being shocked. I was planning. I started screenshotting everything, every line, every timestamp, every emoji. My face was blank, my heart pounding, but I moved with purpose. I emailed the screenshots to myself, using a boring subject line, a grocery list. Just in case. Then I uploaded everything to a private folder on the cloud. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do, but I knew I'd need proof. Upstairs, I heard Jack's footsteps. He was probably coming down for a snack, expecting his loving wife and a warm kitchen. I glanced at the clock, wiped my hands, and put the tablet back exactly where I'd found it. My pulse slowed. No more tears, not tonight. When Jack walked into the kitchen, smiling like he always did, I smiled right back. He kissed my cheek, asked if I'd found a new recipe. I said I had, something he'd love. Inside, though, I was making a new recipe of my own. Patience, resolve, and a dash of cold calculation. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside Jack, both of us cocooned under the navy blue comforter we'd picked out together at Mace's our first year in Chicago. He fell asleep quickly, as he always did, one arm flung carelessly across his side of the bed. For a long time, I just stared at the ceiling, counting the slow pulse of the city lights flickering through the blinds. My mind ran wild with 1,000 a what ifs here and a why Ms, but underneath the noise was something quieter and harder, a sense of purpose building in my chest. The truth was out now. Jack's betrayal was real, not a nightmare I'd wake from. I could almost hear Amanda's laughter echoing in those messages, the way she used my marriage as entertainment. Strangely, I didn't feel the urge to cry. Not then. I felt cold, almost clinical. This wasn't heartbreak. It was war, and I was planning my opening move. By sunrise, I was already out of bed. I padded into the kitchen, careful not to wake him. The city was just coming alive outside, distant sirens and the rattle of the L train mixing with the smell of fresh coffee brewing. I sat at the counter, opened my laptop, and pulled up my email. There they were, all the screenshots. The evidence. Each message was a cut, but I forced myself to look at them, to really see the story they told. It was about more than physical betrayal. It was about the easy way Jack slipped into disrespect, about the little digs at my cooking, my routines, the life we'd built. To Amanda, he played the role of misunderstood, unsatisfied husband, hinting at the things I couldn't give him, never saying my name, but making sure she knew I was the butt of every joke. That's when it hit me. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about the arrogance, the way he counted on me to never notice, never fight back. When Jack finally woke up and shuffled into the kitchen, I greeted him as if nothing was wrong. I poured his coffee, kissed him on the cheek, and asked about his big meeting that day. He smiled, squeezing my hand, and told me how lucky he was to have me. I let him believe it. Every word I spoke, every smile, was a mask. For the first time in our marriage, I understood how easy it was to play a role. After he left for work, the apartment felt strangely peaceful. I showered, dressed, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked the same, brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, jeans, and a sweater, silver necklace Jack had given me last Christmas. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. That afternoon, I started setting things in motion. I made a new folder in the cloud, labeled it with a boring name, e-Utilities. In it, I uploaded every piece of evidence, then set a password only I could remember. I cleared my browser history, deleted the email threads, checked the locks twice on my phone. It felt almost like being in a spy movie. But this was real life, and I had to get every detail right. That evening, when Jack came home, everything was perfectly normal. I'd made chicken masala, his favorite. He poured us each a glass of Pinot Noir, told me about a client who couldn't get their act together. I laughed in all the right places, nodded at his stories, pretended to be the wife he expected. But behind my smile, I was watching everything, the way his eyes darted from me to his phone. How he seemed just a little more relaxed, as if some weight had lifted from his shoulders. He thought he was safe. He thought I didn't know. I was learning things, too. Like how betrayal doesn't always show up as anger or tears. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like patience, like careful observation, like waiting for the perfect moment. The next few days became an exercise in acting. I sent Jack sweet texts at lunch, complimented his tie, even offered to drop by his office with his forgotten water bottle. He beamed, clearly enjoying the attention, basking in what he must have thought was renewed affection. I watched him play his role and wondered if he had any idea that I'd already started to plan his downfall. But I didn't stop there. I decided it was time to get closer to Amanda, too. It was almost too easy to find her online, her Instagram full of yoga poses, coffee shop larties, and hashtags about living your truth. I sent her a friendly, casual message from my real account, mentioning Jack and how we were organizing a small charity event for his work. Would she like to come as a friend of the family? She responded almost immediately. Sounds fun. I'd love to support Jack. Of course she would. I smiled at my screen, the first real smile in days. I didn't care if she suspected anything. She seemed just as naive as Jack, eager for an invite, eager for drama. For the first time since that night at the kitchen island, I felt in control again. Because this wasn't just about catching him. It was about making sure he never forgot who I really was. The days that followed felt surreal. In public, everything was exactly as before. Jack and I hosted our usual Saturday morning brunch with our neighbors, the Millers, who lived 2 floors up. I baked blueberry muffins, Jack mixed mimosas, and we all talked about the coming fall, football games, city festivals, the traffic on the Kennedy Expressway. I caught myself laughing at a joke Jack told about his boss, and for a moment, I almost believed in the performance. But every glance, every little gesture, was under a microscope now. I noticed how Jack smiled just a bit too wide, how he lingered a little too long when his phone buzzed. It wasn't just paranoia. I saw the guilt in his eyes, the flicker that would vanish whenever I met his gaze directly. The hardest part was the silence. No one knew what was happening inside me. My friends, my sister, everyone thought Jack and I were the perfect couple, relationship goals. If only they could see the careful choreography behind every word, every touch. But I was becoming someone else. More precise, more strategic. I even surprised myself with how easy it was to compartmentalize my pain, to hide it behind a warm smile and a glass of wine. Every evening, Jack and I would sit together on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life. He'd lean back, talk about his dreams of buying a little lake house someday, maybe in Michigan or Wisconsin, somewhere quiet. I'd nod and picture how easily he could lie about anything. That was the cruelest part, realizing the distance had always been there, hidden beneath routines and inside jokes. I replayed his texts to Amanda in my head, sometimes at the most random moments, waiting for a traffic light, folding laundry, brushing my teeth. She doesn't make me feel the way you do. Had he ever thought of me while writing those words? Or was I just a shadow in the background of his real life? I started keeping a journal, something I hadn't done since college. Each night, after Jack fell asleep, I'd write down everything I felt: anger, disgust, even brief moments of nostalgia for the girl I used to be, the one who believed in forever. The pages became a map of my changing heart, sometimes tender, sometimes furious, sometimes so cold I shocked myself. But I never let the mask slip. Not once. During the next week, I ramped up my performance. I bought Jack tickets to a Cubs game with his friends, then spent the night making homemade caramel popcorn for them. I told everyone at work how lucky I was to have such a supportive husband. People smiled. Some even said they envied me. I smiled back and wished I could tell them the truth. But I was saving the truth for the right moment, the moment when the mask would become a weapon. Meanwhile, Amanda and I exchanged a few more messages. She told me she remembered meeting me once at a Christmas party, said I seemed as so put together. I could almost hear the undertone, the smugness behind her polite words. I played my part, friendly, even eager, asking if she wanted to bring a guest to our charity event. Sure, she replied. I'll bring my friend Tessa, if that's okay. Perfect, I thought. The more, the merrier. Jack, for his part, seemed completely unaware of what was coming. He spent more time at home, started leaving his phone face down on the table, subtle but telling. When I offered to help him with a project for work, he thanked me with a little too much enthusiasm. He even suggested we take a weekend trip to Milwaukee, just us. Maybe he sensed something, or maybe he was trying to bury his guilt under a pile of sweet gestures. I went along with all of it. Played the loving wife. Hugged him a little tighter, laughed a little louder. Sometimes, when he wrapped his arms around me, I wondered what he'd do if he knew the storm I was building behind my calm. But underneath it all, there was a strange kind of power. I wasn't just Jack's wife anymore. I was the director of this story, the one writing the next scene. The old me, the trusting, open-hearted girl, she was gone, at least for now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone willing to wait for the perfect moment to change everything. On Friday afternoon, I finalized the guest list for the charity event, confirmed the catering, and paid the AV deposit for a projector and screen. No one, not even Jack, suspected a thing. He texted to say he was running late at the office. I replied with a heart emoji, told him to drive safe. Then, I closed my laptop, looked out the window at the city I'd called home for 8 years, and let myself feel proud, not for surviving, but for refusing to be a victim. Because some stories aren't about heartbreak. They're about rising, about reclaiming your own narrative. The week before the event felt like living in a parallel world, one where I was both the loving wife and the silent architect of Jack's reckoning. The duality was almost intoxicating. Mornings were ordinary, coffee brewing before sunrise, Jack's familiar shuffle as he checked the weather on his phone, a quick kiss before he headed out the door. But behind every routine, I was calculating, always one step ahead. I started planning the party with the kind of precision usually reserved for my old college finals. The venue was a beautiful event space on the edge of River North, elegant, with big windows and exposed brick, the kind of place where nobody would expect drama. I told Jack it would be perfect for networking, that his boss might even come if we were lucky. He seemed genuinely pleased, proud even. He offered to help with the guest list, but I'd already finished it, inviting friends, colleagues, a handful of Jack's old college buddies, and, of course, Amanda. Jack was eager to be involved. He forwarded names, suggested playlists, even sent me a list of caterers he liked. I thanked him, smiling sweetly, letting him believe this was all for him. He was more attentive than ever, offering to pick up groceries on his way home, surprising me with flowers for no reason, texting me little I love you ES throughout the day. If I didn't know better, I might have believed we were having a second honeymoon. But I saw the cracks beneath the surface. He was sleeping less, sometimes waking in the middle of the night to check his phone in the bathroom. He was nervous, but he hid it well. Part of me wanted to confront him, to force the truth out into the open, but another part enjoyed the dance, this intricate performance, where only I knew the script. Every evening, I'd find time to sit alone in the living room, double-checking every detail for the party. I coordinated with the AV company, making sure they'd be able to project a slideshow of photos from Jack's career and our life together. In reality, most of the slides were innocent. Vacations, holidays, milestones. Only the last few would reveal the truth. I saved the most damning screenshots for the finale, labeling the file simply a memories. I bought a new dress for the occasion, elegant, navy blue with a low back, something that made me feel powerful. I booked an appointment for my hair and nails the morning of the event. If I was going to confront betrayal in front of a crowd, I wanted to look invincible. Meanwhile, Amanda and I exchanged a few more messages about the party. She seemed genuinely excited, asking about dress code and whether she could bring a +1. Of course. I replied. The more, the merrier. She had no idea she was stepping into a trap. Jack, for his part, asked about the menu, the seating, even the music playlist. I let him think he was in control. As the week wore on, I found myself thinking less about the pain and more about the anticipation. My anger, which had burned so hot at first, was cooling into something sharper, more focused. I realized I didn't want just revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted Jack to see exactly what he'd thrown away. I wanted Amanda to realize what she'd enabled. And I wanted everyone else, the friends, the colleagues, the people who always called us the perfect couple, to see that perfection was just a costume. There were moments when the weight of it all nearly overwhelmed me. One evening, I found myself sitting on the edge of our bed, clutching a photo of Jack and me from our first trip to New York. I remembered the way he'd held my hand as we wandered through Central Park, the way he'd promised to love me and no matter what. I allowed myself a few tears, just a few. Then I wiped them away, stood up, and put the picture in a drawer. That chapter was over. The night before the party, Jack and I went out for pizza, our Friday night ritual. He held my hand across the table, ordered my favorite toppings, and told me he was proud of me for putting together such a big event. I smiled and squeezed his hand, letting him see the version of me he wanted. Inside, I was steeling myself for the next day, rehearsing the words I'd say, the look I'd give him as everything came crashing down. That night, I lay awake while Jack slept beside me, his breathing deep and steady. I watched the city lights dance on the ceiling, thinking of all the women who'd sat in beds like this, nursing secrets and heartbreak, waiting for the right moment to take back their lives. I wondered if they'd felt the same strange mixture of grief and hope. I hoped so. When I finally drifted off to sleep, It was with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. I'd done everything I could. The pieces were in place. Tomorrow, the mask would come off, for good. The morning of the event dawned grey and cool, with the kind of overcast sky Chicago is famous for in early October. I woke up before Jack, lying in the hush of our bedroom, feeling both electric and strangely calm. Today, everything would change. There was a surreal, cinematic quality to each moment. My feet on the hardwood, the shower running, the scent of my lavender body wash. I moved like someone living inside a story. Jack was in an unusually good mood, humming as he got dressed. He came up behind me in the kitchen, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed the back of my neck. "Tonight's going to be perfect," he whispered, and for the briefest second, I wondered if he sensed the coming storm or if he'd already convinced himself that his secret was safe. Either way, I returned his smile, and together we reviewed the final details: the caterers, the guest list, the slideshow. Jack praised my organization, called me amazing. I nodded, hiding the bittersweet ache those words now brought. He left for the venue early to help with setup, leaving me alone in our apartment. I dressed with a care that bordered on reverence: navy dress, soft waves in my hair, makeup just bold enough to make me feel untouchable. I packed the flash drive with the final slideshow into my purse and checked it twice before leaving. The venue was just as beautiful as I'd remembered: string lights glowing along exposed beams, the faint scent of lilies on every table. I greeted the staff, checked the sound system, and made sure the AV team understood the cue for the presentation. "You'll play the slideshow right after my thank you speech," I said, keeping my tone even. "Wait for my signal." They nodded, none the wiser. Guests arrived one by one, their voices rising in excitement, the clink of glasses echoing off brick walls. Jack was in his element, charming, confident, introducing me as the mastermind behind it all. People complimented my dress, my organizational skills, our perfect partnership. I smiled, thanked them, let them see exactly what they wanted to see. Inside, my heart was hammering, but on the surface I was all elegance and poise. Amanda arrived just after 7, wearing a form-fitting emerald dress, hair perfectly styled. She looked happy, relaxed, utterly unaware. I greeted her warmly, introduced her to a few of Jack's colleagues, and watched the two of them exchange a glance, a flicker of recognition, a spark of something unspoken. It didn't matter anymore. The script was already written. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Jack made a toast, thanking me, praising our marriage, our team. I saw Amanda watching him, a slight smile on her lips. I watched everyone, every reaction, storing it away for later. As plates were cleared and the lights dimmed slightly for the presentation, I felt a strange wave of peace settle over me. I took the microphone with steady hands, thanked our guests for coming, spoke about the charity, and made a few jokes about Jack's forgetfulness, something harmless, something everyone could laugh at. People smiled, raised their glasses, toasted to love and partnership. Then, with a nod to the AV team, I gave the signal. The slideshow began innocently, photos of Jack and me on vacations, at holidays, at family events. The crowd murmured appreciatively, the mood warm and nostalgic. But as the images shifted, text began to appear on the screen. At first, it was just playful messages, until suddenly, the tone changed. The infamous line, blown up across the projector, "Is she doesn't make me feel the way you do." A ripple moved through the crowd. Gasps, awkward glances, uneasy laughter. Then more screenshots, each one a piece of the truth I'd carried alone for weeks. Dates, pet names, private plans. The room fell into a stunned silence. I kept my eyes on the screen, letting the evidence speak for itself. I finally looked at Jack. His face was ashen, his mouth open, hands trembling on the tablecloth. Amanda was frozen, color draining from her face, her confidence gone in a heartbeat. I felt a surge of relief, pure, clean, and sharp. For the first time since the night I found those messages, I felt seen. The AV team ended the slideshow. I smiled calmly, thanked everyone again as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and handed the microphone back to the host. The guests were silent, some exchanging glances of shock, others with small, knowing smiles. A reckoning had come, and everyone knew it. Jack tried to speak, whispering my name, but I stepped away before he could touch me. In my purse, I felt the envelope with divorce papers and the printed screenshots, the final act yet to come. I walked through the crowd, head high, every step a declaration. I would not be made small by someone else's betrayal. Not now, not ever again. The moments after the slideshow were almost dreamlike. The room, once so loud with laughter and small talk, had gone completely silent except for the soft clinking of glasses. I moved through the crowd as if in slow motion. Jack was behind me somewhere. I could feel the tension in the air, the gravity pulling us together for one last confrontation. But I kept moving forward, greeting the guests who still managed to meet my eyes, grateful for those who simply squeezed my hand in silent support. At the far end of the room, I found a patch of calm near the windows, the city spread out in 1,000 tiny lights. For a few seconds, I let myself breathe. Then I felt Jack's hand on my arm. I turned to face him, my expression calm, almost gentle, the way you look at someone you've already decided to leave. "Emily, please," he started, voice ragged with panic. I studied him. His tie was crooked, his face still pale. Around us, guests pretended not to watch. But I could feel their attention, a silent audience for the final act. "Jack," I said quietly, "don't make a scene." "Not tonight." He swallowed hard. "I can explain." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "Don't. You already explained everything. You just didn't know you had an audience." His mouth opened, then closed. I could see his thoughts scrambling for a way out, for an excuse, for a shred of the old charm that had always worked before. But there was nothing left. For a brief second, I almost pitied him. Almost. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, thick, cream-colored, with his name written in my careful script. I pressed it into his hands. Inside, the divorce papers, already signed, and printed copies of the screenshots. I leaned in just enough that only he could hear. "I may not give you pleasure, Jack, but I sure know how to take away your peace." The words landed like a stone. He blinked, stunned, the weight of humiliation and loss finally settling on his shoulders. He didn't open the envelope. He didn't need to. Amanda stood a few feet away, her friend Tessa beside her, both rooted in place by the chaos. Amanda's face was a study in regret, wide eyes, shaking hands, her confidence gone. She clutched her purse like a lifeline. She met my gaze for a split second, searching for anger or blame. I just gave her a tired smile, a look that said, "You can have him." He was never really mine, was he? She turned and left, her heels clicking across the hardwood, the sound sharp in the hush. The guests parted silently as I walked toward the doors. Some looked shocked, others quietly approving, more than a few with small smiles. I felt their stares on my back, but I didn't shrink away from them. In a strange way, I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Near the exit, one of Jack's colleagues, Karen, reached out to touch my arm. "If you ever need a lawyer," as she whispered, "call me. You're braver than you think." I nodded, the gratitude real. It wasn't about their approval, but it didn't hurt to have it. Outside, the air was crisp and cool, a sharp contrast to the charged atmosphere inside. The noise from the street, honking horns, distant laughter, the city's steady heartbeat, reminded me how small this night really was in the grand scheme of things. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and started walking. Each step away from the venue felt lighter. Behind me, I heard a wave of applause. It was small, a cluster of friends, maybe, but it was enough to make me pause. I didn't turn around. I let the moment settle over me, a quiet affirmation that I was not, and never would be, alone in my pain. A car pulled up. I slid into the back seat, telling the driver my address. As the city lights blurred past the window, I watched my reflection. Strong, steady, no longer defined by Jack or anyone else's opinion of me. I realized then that freedom isn't something someone can hand you. It's something you seize for yourself, even if you have to break your own heart to do it. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I could build. And this time, I would do it on my own terms. The ride home was quiet. I leaned my head against the car window, watching the city slip by, streetlights blurring into golden streaks. My phone buzzed with messages, a few from friends who had been at the party, one from my sister asking if I was okay, and several from Jack. I ignored them all. For once, I wanted silence. I wanted to hear nothing but the sound of my own thoughts, unfiltered by anyone else's needs. When I reached our condo, I hesitated outside the door. Inside was the life I'd built with Jack, the photos on the hallway table, the shoes we always tripped over, the jacket I bought him last Christmas still hanging by the door. I braced myself before stepping in, half expecting to feel hollow or angry. Instead, I felt clean. The kind of clarity that comes only after a storm. The living room was just as we'd left it, candles on the coffee table, his favorite throw blanket draped over the couch, a half-finished puzzle spread across the dining table. I walked through the apartment slowly, touching the things that used to mean something, the chipped mug from our honeymoon, the framed print from our first trip to New Orleans, the silly magnets on the fridge. Each one was a marker of a different time, a different version of me. I stood at the window, looking out over the city. Chicago was alive, traffic moving, bars closing, taxis weaving through intersections, everyone on their own journey. For the first time, I realized how much of myself I'd poured into my marriage. How much of my happiness I'd hung on someone else's actions, someone else's approval. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage or tear through the apartment. I simply changed into my comfiest pajamas, made a cup of herbal tea, and curled up on the couch with an old novel I hadn't touched in years. The words felt different now, softer, sharper, more real. By the time I drifted off to sleep, dawn was already breaking over the lake. When I woke the next morning, the world felt new. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting stripes on the hardwood. For the first time in a long time, I let myself linger in bed, stretching out across the whole mattress. I checked my phone. More messages from Jack, increasingly desperate. I read the last one. Emily, please. Can we talk? I'm so sorry. I never meant. I deleted it without replying. Instead, I texted my sister. You want to meet for brunch? My treat. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from her at a little cafe in Lincoln Park, sipping the strongest coffee I could order. She studied my face for signs of heartbreak, but I only shrugged. It's over, I said simply. And I'm okay. She squeezed my hand, the kind of silent understanding only sisters share. I'm proud of you, she whispered. You didn't just survive, Em. You owned it. We spent hours talking, not about Jack, but about everything else, childhood stories, future plans, silly dreams. I realized how much life I'd let slip by while trying to hold onto a marriage that wasn't really mine anymore. Back home, I started cleaning. Not the frantic, grief-driven kind of cleaning, but something slower, more intentional. I boxed up the wedding photos, the souvenirs, anything that felt like a weight around my neck. I didn't throw them away, I just put them out of sight, making space for something new. That afternoon, I did something bold. I made a vision board. It sounds cliché, but for me, it was a promise to myself. I clipped photos of places I wanted to visit: Seattle, San Diego, Paris. I wrote down dreams I'd set aside: taking a pottery class, running a half marathon, starting my own business. I even cut out words from magazines: strength, joy, freedom, create. Words that belonged to me now. I emailed my boss and asked for a week off. Family emergency, I wrote. It wasn't a lie, I was rescuing myself. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I poured a glass of wine and stood on my balcony, feeling the wind in my hair. I thought about the version of myself who had walked into that marriage so full of hope. I grieved for her, but I didn't want to go back. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again, this time, a message from Karen, the lawyer from the party. Let me know if you need anything. Coffee, company, legal advice, or just someone to vent to. You've got an army behind you, even if you don't see us. I smiled. Maybe I'd take her up on that offer. Maybe I'd start saying yes to all the things I'd been too afraid to want. As darkness settled over the city, I made another promise. I would live boldly, out loud, on my own terms. No more shrinking, no more waiting for someone else's approval. My story was mine to write, and I was just getting started.